Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, these messages are dated January 24, 2025. Message number 123. Mr. President, House Bill number 94, Charter School Authorizations Amendments, passed the House on third reading. Ayes 45, noes 16, excused 1. Message number 124. Mr. President, House Bill number 96, prohibiting mask, vaccine, and testing discrimination, passed the House on third reading in an amended form. Ayes 45, noes 16, excused 1. Sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Reports from Standing Committee.
The following reports are dated January 24, 2025. Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 18, Enhanced Oil Recovery Severance Tax Exemption, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Garou, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 51, Wyoming Telecommunications Act Revisions, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Garou, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 55, third-party filers, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Garou, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 82, Omnibus Water Bill Planning, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Garou, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Garou, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review and Objection be moved from Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to Committee Number 5, Agriculture.
What was the Senate file again on that one?
127.
Senate File 127. Hearing no objection, Senate File 127 has been re-referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senator Garou.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hey, this is working pretty good.
I can see you in the corner of my eye. How about a privilege of the floor?
Privilege of the floor. Thank you.
I don't know what they put in our lunch today.
Oh, no, not much. We're just talking about a liquor bill. Mr. President, I want to introduce somebody who's up here in the audience, but I'll tell you, a little quick story. If you would have asked anyone who were members of the body 5 years ago that if the chairman of the County Commissioners Association of the state of Wyoming would be A, a Democrat, B, a woman, and C, from Teton County, you'd have carried me out of here. But if you look over my shoulder here, if she stand up, Natalie Amacker, and there she stands from our county commission and president of the County Commissioners Association. And Mr. President, was richly deserved. So thank you.
All right. Welcome to the Senate. Any more privileges of the floor? All right.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole, and we are going to move faster than one bill an hour, good senators.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Senator Anderson, come on down.
Committee of the Whole will please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 10, I believe, Senate File 10. Would the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 10, Settlement Agreements for Minors, Parental Authorization, an act relating to children, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Craigo, Crum, Hicks, Kolb, and Olson. Senator Olson, Chairman.
Heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 10 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments on this bill. It is a little simple bill, so hopefully this can make up some lost time that we had from this morning. And for an explanation of the Senate file, I will turn it over to the good country lawyer. Oh, no, I won't turn it over to the good country lawyer. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Kolb.
Senator Kolb, you've been turned over.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to explain this good little bill to the body. So as the title states, settlement agreements between minor parental authorization. It's relating to children, authorizing parents and guardians to enter into binding settlements on behalf of their minor children. And it also provides a cause of action in case it's necessary as to protect the minors. What it truly amounts to is an update for inflationary purposes. As time has gone by, the preceding maximums of $5,000 and $3,000 have been updated to the proposed $25,000, and both of them for both types of actions, for $25,000 for either one, and for the sake of uniformity. This bill becomes effective July 1, 2025. And like I mentioned in the preface of this, that there are protections for the minors, and that resides on page 6, line 5, if there's any questions. And I look forward to stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Questions? You must have covered it pretty well, Mr. Kolb. You are ready for the question. All those in favor of Senator Olson's motion to adopt the standing committee, no, the committee of the, wrong one, the bill. When the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 10, please say aye. Opposed? No. That bill passes the committee of the whole. Next, oh, yes. Senator Larson, did you have a
Of information.
yes.
I kind of jumped ahead of myself anyway, before lunch, but anyway, I'd like to give a little guidance on where we're at on this next bill. Visiting with our LSO staff, I have an item I wanted to read. So it says, the current procedural condition of Senate File 41, Federal Acts, Legal Actions Authorized. After being introduced, Senate File 41 was referred to the Senate Ag Committee. The Agricultural Committee considered the bill and recommended that the bill do pass with an amendment. The bill was returned to the chief clerk, and the bill was reported back to the Senate. Upon being reported back to the Senate, the bill was referred to the Appropriations Committee. The Senate Appropriations Committee then considered the bill, and the motion was made on the bill. That motion failed, and no other motion was made on the bill. The Appropriations Committee therefore proposed no changes to Senate File 41 pursuant to Senate File 40, Rule 4-8, which requires the Appropriations Committee to report a re-referred bill back to the Senate. The bill was then appropriately reported back to the Senate as do pass fail. Because the Senate file was re-referred to the Appropriations Committee, and since the Appropriations Committee did not amend the bill now stands before the Senate in exactly the condition it was after the Agricultural Committee reported the bill back to the Senate. This bill is currently on the general file, is ready to be considered on the Committee of the Whole. During the Committee of the Whole, the Agricultural Committee should make its recommendations on the bill, and the Senate should consider the amendment proposed by the Agricultural Committee.
Thank you, Senator Larson. Thank you for the information. Next bill to come before us is Senate File 41. Would reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 41, Federal Acts, Legal Actions Authorized, an act relating to the legislature, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 5, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Craigo, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pearson. Senator French, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass failed. Ayes, Senators Guru, Larson. Noes, Senators Driscoll, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure, Senator French?
I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 41 do pass. And for an explanation, I call on Senator Ide. He will discuss the bill and any amendments.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologize to the body for my dysfunction yesterday on this bill. We spent a lot of time on it. I'll take another stab at it here today. There's no guarantees, but I'll do the best that I can. It was a little complicated. So I presented the bill yesterday. I don't think there's really any more to carry on about that. I'll just briefly tell everybody in the body Senate File 41 is passed out of it's been worked on the last couple of years in the Ag Committee, got vetoed by the governor, passed both chambers. We've seen this thing a couple of times, so I don't want to belabor on with that. Essentially what it does is gives the legislature standing to prosecute an action that we think is relevant to the integrity of the legislature here, this chamber and the one over there. It does have an appropriation on it. So effectively, the body, when we're in session, could vote to bring a lawsuit, or if we're out of session, the management council could decide to do that. That kind of sums up the bill that I didn't sum up yesterday. So right now, I think is a good time to discuss, and I would like to move or have the standing committee amendment read in.
Yes, let's have the standing committee amendment read in.
Senate File 41, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 6, after.
Go ahead, Senator Ide.
I'd like to move the standing committee amendment to Senate File 41.
Go ahead.
So it's pretty simple. We had this $75 million appropriation in the interim committee Senate File 41 bill, and then when we got to our first committee meeting, when we read this bill, there was an amendment from LSO to kind of clean up the language. So there was a definite appropriation onto this bill, and beforehand there wasn't. So it was amended for that reason. So if in 5 years, there's no money in the LSRA, we can't really do anything, but this appropriation would affirm that we have the money to use for a lawsuit. So the language in this is effectively what we came out of committee with before the standing committee amendment. The only thing effectively different about this is it does have a 2-year time frame on it, and I talked to quite a few people about that. I think it sunsets in 2028. And a lot of my colleagues in here said that, if we want to continue that on, then we just bring some legislation to continue on that particular appropriation. So the appropriation, all it is originally, we wanted to make it strong, let the feds know that we're here, we're strong. We don't want you pushing us around like you have been for a long time. And it was a little bit of a shot across the bow, but these lawsuits are huge and they're expensive. So I think it's a real good appropriation. 47% of our state, the surface, like I said the other day, 70% of our minerals. I mean, we need to be armed and dangerous to fight back against this. and act like we're a real state, a sovereign state. So with that, I'll ask for any questions.
So anything on the standing committee amendment number 1? Any discussion on standing committee amendment number 1? Standing committee amendment number 1. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do think standing committee amendment number 1 is appropriate just from a housekeeping standpoint. It's the right thing to do, whether you support the $75 million or not. I'm going to be supporting it because it's better fund management for the state. And then obviously it's a separate issue as to whether or not you support that appropriation level or support the legislation, but on and for the amendment.
Other discussion on the amendment, on the standing committee amendment? Other discussion, other discussion? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 41, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That standing committee amendment passes. Senator Ide, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I would request that without objection that we remove, I move to withdraw Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 41. That was the one introduced yesterday, hopefully, and ask for your aye vote on that. We'll just get rid of that amendment because we just passed the other one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll see. Senator Case.
Point of order.
Yes.
You don't want to move that because we could vote the amendment up or down. Just, if it's your amendment, just request that it be removed. You can respond, absent objection, it's withdrawn. Anybody in the body can adopt it. When we offer an amendment on the floor, it's settling that it's not really ours. So that's why we have to see if anybody else wants to adopt it, but just request.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, good senator from Fremont County. I knew I'd fumble the football here a little bit more again, but without objection, I move to withdraw.
No, just without objection. Remove it, remove it.
I request that we remove Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 41. Thank you.
Are there any objections?
No.
Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, we will remove Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 41.
I object.
Huh? Withdraw? We withdraw that
Yes.
Committee of the Whole Amendment.
Yes.
All right, now we're back on the bill. Senator Ide, would you like to speak on the bill now?
I wish I was as smooth as that young lady that sang for us this morning. I'm far away from that, that's for sure. Mr. Chairman, I think we discussed that bill. I don't want to carry on here anymore. I would just ask for your favorable vote and get this thing back in the queue and get it over to the House. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, we're talking here about suing the federal government. And unfortunately, in this day and age, the way the federal government behaves and the extent to which they own Wyoming, they can be a real problem, and we do need to sue them periodically. And Mr. Chairman, it's a very serious matter. I think the lawsuits require people who are experienced in litigation to supervise whatever lawyers we're actually using. They require regular, I think, supervision as the lawsuit proceeds and various issues come up and strategies evolve as to how you're going to handle things and what you want to do. Mr. Chairman, I think frankly, with that kind of a situation, we are much better off having the executive branch undertake these lawsuits. And I think it's a mistake for this legislature, which is not a permanent, we're not in session all the time, we're not here all the time, or we can act. We're not an executive. We're really a committee of 93 these days. Frankly, I think we'll get a better job done when we do need to sue the federal government, Mr. Chairman, if we have the executive branch do it. And for that reason, I'm going to vote no on this bill, and I would urge the rest of you to do so. Likewise, it's not that we're always opposed to suing the federal government. Is it when we do it, we need to do it very carefully and very seriously and maximize our chances of winning. And that's turning this one over to the executive branch because it is an executive branch function.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this bill, I agree with the previous speaker. The legislature should legislate and set policy, but not try to litigate. We are not good litigators. That takes some training and schooling and those kind of things to know how to do that correctly. And we have an organization that does that quite nicely for us right now. That's the executive committee, or the executive branch, and the AG. So 1 century and 1 score plus 14 years ago, the executive section was set up, the AG was set up, and they have been performing this action ever since, and they've been doing a good job with it. This bill could employ more attorneys than we have in the state. We have a shortage of attorneys in the state, we've heard, and I'm afraid this would employ a lot of them. So I think this is bad legislation and a bad idea. Please vote no.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a fairly simple inquiry. The bill that passed the bodies last year stayed with the 2/3 vote of Management Council. This bill goes to a majority. And while I recognize that's 1 vote difference, 6 to 7, Management Council used to be more members. And when this bill, when the 2/3 was put in. So any discussion about why the majority, from 2/3 to majority this year versus last year, when actually the Management Council is the same in those two years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's next? Who's next? Senator Hicks?
Mr. President, I just answered the question on the management council is because that old language used to be 13 members, it's now 10. 2/3 of 10 is 5.33. The math doesn't work out, but if you use a majority, it's 5. And so you end up at the same place, or 6, I mean, with the majority. So it actually takes 6 members of management council versus the 2/3, which is almost the same number, so.
Who's next? Who would like to address? Senator Hutchings.
Just a quick statement, Mr. Chairman, and that is the good bringer of the bill, or explainer, mentioned the property clause of the United States Constitution. It's located in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. If we all would read that, we see that this is a good bill, and I will stand in support of it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Who's next? Senator Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I'm on and for this bill. We have a situation where we can't export our coal to places that would like it through our ports in America because we didn't sue in a timely manner. And this is timely. We're going to be sorry if we don't gear up and fund this. And if we do, then we might just intimidate the feds out of the RMP, Rock Springs RMP land grab that they would like to try to do.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Guru, and then we'll, Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against, I understand the frustration that brought this bill. I also understand, I too sometimes get frustrated with federal actions. And we do fund pots of money, and we have, for the executive branch to voice Wyoming's concerns in court when these actions occur. Now we're asked to create another fund for the legislature to do it. Now, imagine, if you will, a situation comes up, probably won't now, right? But it just may. Something come up that we and the executive branch both feel are egregious to our state and our sovereign power as a state in this country. They hire lawyers, we hire lawyers. Now all of a sudden, we're all at the table, and we may have different views on exactly how to go about it. And we've got two pots of money working against each other. I don't think this is a well thought out bill. I think that this is something that maybe we, if it were to come, should come with closer coordination with the executive branch. I do agree with the other speakers who say we have that ability, and we've given authority, frankly, more than I care to, frankly, to the executive to do this work. And frankly, I've asked for more. So when we come to you on the floor with his ask for this year, that we talk about what they've spent the money on up to now, because right now we don't really know. So I'm reluctant and will not vote for another open-ended fund to be put out just to be expended by a smaller group or even a 2/3 majority of this body before we really know what we're getting into and know how best to proceed to win with those groups. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We'll go to Jones. She hasn't spoke yet, and then we'll get to you, Senator Hicks. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, since it was brought up about the Rock Springs RMP in here, I'm wondering if there are anybody who knows more about legal proceedings than I do. Is it more helpful if the counties are suing, the governor's suing, and the legislative body is suing? Does this make the case stronger, weaker? Can someone give us any clarification on that?
Thank you, Senator Jones. We'll try to get that for you. We're going to go to Senator Hicks next.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification, 2/3 of 10 is 6.6. It's hard to have 6/10 of a vote from anybody on management council. That majority is 6. That just clears that up of whether it's 2/3 or whether it's a majority.
And I assume that's not the way they teach it in Baggs High School, right? Thank you, Senator. Senator Dockstader.
I don't know that this bill was as needed as much as it was before. Situations change, but that's just my point. It changes. There could be changes in our administration, changes in the federal administration. I'd like to keep my options open and make sure that we have another possibility to take care of our Wyoming needs and our Wyoming interests, so I'll be for the bill.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the bill, and first I'll start off by saying that to the good senator from Carbon County's point, on the 2/3 versus a majority, the majority leads to 6 votes under the current management structure. 6 votes out of 10 is a majority. 2/3 is 7 votes. 6.6 has to be rounded up. Even if it was 6.01, it would have to be rounded to 7 because you have to achieve that number. That's how this works. So it's 6 votes for a majority, 7 votes for 2/3 for a management council of 10.
Is that a Kelly Walsh or a Natrona math question?
Go Mustangs. Mr. Chairman, as far as the bill itself, separation of powers is annoying and inconvenient for us, right? We all want to be the executive branch. We want to be able to take action outside of session. We all want to be an executive, to tell people what to do, to have power of action instead of just legislation. I understand that sentiment. We all share that sentiment. We feel that. But there's a reason why we have a separation of powers, and there's a reason why those responsibilities are not empowered into any one chamber, any one body, any one person, or any one institution. And that was by intent of the framers of our original Constitution at the federal level and our state Constitution here in Wyoming. It's not an accident that we're not empowered to file general lawsuits and bring action outside of session, because this chamber only has power as a body. The Management Council, ironically, we had this great discussion the other day about how we wanted to ensure that the Management Council's powers were limited. It should only do things like talk about what the interim topics should be and make sure that the lights stay on and that our staff is well treated, right? Let's minimize the responsibilities of the Management Council. And literally the same day, we have a conversation about and let's give them $75 million to act on behalf of the legislature, whether the rest of us like it or not, to bring lawsuits against the federal government. Just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, those two themes are inconsistent. It is not our responsibility, and we don't always agree with the chief executive. In fact, I frequently disagree with the chief executive. This may come as some surprise to you. It's like literally my job. And yet, I do not believe that I or we should be filing lawsuits. Now, there are exceptions to that. The good tall senator from Natrona County is exactly right. That when the legislature is acting on behalf of the legislative interests, so things along the lines of redistricting and things along the lines of our specific rights as a body, that's when we have unique and specific standing where we could bring action. Because it's the interests of the body. And at that point in time, it does have to be the interest of the entirety of the body. This is not a weakness of our system. We can all also, Mr. Chairman, file our own court cases individually. We may or may not have standing. In most of the ones we're talking about, we probably don't. We can file amicus brief materials on behalf of a group of people, on behalf of ourselves, friends of the court. That's well within our purview as individual legislators, not binding the body, but basically stating that as an individual legislator, this is a view I have. And perhaps I have specific interest, I have expertise. The court will take that into consideration and will recognize if a group of legislators representing a specific region has an interest and wants to bring that amicus brief to the court, they'll take that into consideration. In fact, I joined with another legislator in this room. We filed an amicus brief a couple of years ago. We'll let you know how the case goes. But the idea that we would have a $75 million pool of funding so that we can act independent from and perhaps counter to the interests of Wyoming's executive branch is a direct violation of the separation of powers that our founding fathers intentionally put into place. Again, I'll reiterate, for good reason, on and against.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and so in my time on Management Council and that feed bill every year, we put in a component of funding in there every year to hire consultants, and that can be legal consultants. In my time there, we've had numerous discussions about Management Council under their authority, using the money that was appropriated for professional services like consultants on recalibration. And we fund the school litigation division, but we also have money in there. And I can remember on a number of occasions where Management Council contemplated doing something similar to this, was using part of that money that was appropriated to hire legal counsel to represent the legislative body in school litigation. And so that's been contemplated for a number of years. I've sat through several of those discussions. So this whole concept that we've never discussed it or never contemplated that, and that we don't have the funds to do that, we have done that. We've never instigated and hired our own legal counsel, but it's certainly been a topic of discussion in Management Council over the last 3 years. And so it is not a foreign concept. And we have discussed it in Management Council. There's money in that account that we could have utilized as Management Council and gone forward under that and hired separate legal counsel for the purposes of representing the legislative body. So it's not something that hasn't been contemplated in the past or discussed.
Thank you, Senator. Who else? Let's go, let's get some new voices. Let's get Senator Craig, and then we'll go back to Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just was going to respond to the good senator in the back from Sweetwater County. She asked, what's it look like if we have different entities in the same lawsuit, and whether that's good or bad. And like any good lawyer, I'm going to say it depends. And it would really depend on what the different stances were, right? If they're all rowing in the same direction, it would be fine. If they're going in different directions, admittedly, as it has been mentioned on this floor, that could cause issues. And so just hopefully that answers her question a little bit, because it would really depend on the circumstances.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Landon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to push back a little bit and mildly disagree with my friend from the southern part of the state. This is really the next step. This is not something that our management council has considered for very long, if at all. And honestly, the senator from Albany County expressed exactly what was concerning me, and that is that it's one thing for all of us to get together, maybe in a special session, and say, we've got a real problem out there, and take a vote. It's quite another for us to send about 7, 8, 9, 10 of us down to a room on our behalf, and we're not even here anymore, and to have them file a lawsuit on our behalf. That's where I get the heartburn, folks. We have set aside monies that we've used in a legal way to hire consultants, to have money set aside for counsel on various, but we have never contemplated filing a lawsuit on the part of Wyoming, on behalf of Wyoming, and I don't think the legislature should be doing that. And that's just a separation of powers issue, and for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I just can't support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Who's next? Senator Ide, you might as well get after all
Thank
these
you,
guys.
Mr. Chairman. I'll try to wrap it up here. A lot of good discussion here. Some I agree with, some I don't. The comments made that this hasn't been thought through, I have to push back and disagree with that. I mean, we've had this in the queue. It passed for 2 years, effectively a year and a half. It passed both chambers, 75% supermajority. So it has been thought out. And the good senator from back in the corner here, his comments hit home to me. I mean, these administrations change all the time. And at the time we were working on this, we were getting, pummeled in the corner and looking for ways to fight back and make some statements. Times change. I mean, everybody's kind of cooling off maybe a little bit with this new administration, and we'll be punching again down the road. I mean, there's going to be more Rock Springs RMPs and Buffalo RMPs, and I think we need to be prepared. We need to keep our options open, like the good senator said. And let's see, there's another comment here. Good senator from the Ivory Tower talking about amicus briefs. I mean, that's the way I prefer to go. There's a lot of pro bono property rights attorneys. We had them do one for the Rock Springs RMP, and we had 26 legislators sign on to it. The Utah lawsuit on their federal lands transfer, we did another amicus brief with a pro bono law firm and had them sign on to it. They don't take government money. I prefer that route, but this gives us some strength here to protect the rest of our state. We have to have some horsepower and protect our interests here in this chamber, the legislature. That's what, as I referred to in the bill, the enclave clause, specifically requires the federal government to get permission from the state legislature if they want to buy more land within our state. And nobody pays any attention to that anymore. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, read it. The consent of the legislature, and only for military purposes, forts, arsenals, magazines, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So I think we need to show strength here. And I encourage your vote on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Looking around, are you ready for the question? Question is on, wasn't here when the original motion was made. Senator, who made the motion? Senator French's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, they do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 41. Please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senate File 41 is passed committee of the whole. I didn't think I'd be up here all day.
Well, I had it written down there for you. Okay, we're moving right along. Next bill to come for your pleasure is Senate File 102. Would the reading clerk please read that one in?
Senate File 102, Surviving Parents of Gold Star Veterans Exemptions, an act relating to taxation and revenue, sponsored by Senator Landon, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Pappas. Excuse me. Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a recommendation of due pass on Senate File 102, Surviving Parents of Gold Star Veterans Exemptions. There is a standing committee amendment. Can I have it read in?
Yes, read that in.
Senate File 102, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, lines 16 through 21, delete.
Thank you. And for an explanation of this bill, I will turn it over to Senator Landon.
Senator Landon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the chairman of our Transportation Military Affairs Committee and the committee for their support. Senators, I bring you Senate File 102 this afternoon. This is a bill about the families of our service members who have given their lives in combat. Last Memorial Day, Mr. Chairman, you and I were both at an event up there at the beautiful state facility in my neck of the woods. And in that beautiful chapel, we had a great ceremony, and afterwards I ran into some friends whom I've known for a few years now, dating back to a time where I tried to establish down here some help for some endowments on behalf of our service members who had lost their lives in combat for our country. And this gentleman, he and I were visiting, and I felt so badly for them, and I always do when I run into them because of what they've lost. They have missed their son so badly for these years. And so I thought, well, at least the state is doing something, I'm sure, for them. Went home, did a little homework, and found out that actually we're not. We're not doing anything in the case of this family and two other families that I visited with. You see, what we do is that we provide a little bit of an exemption, Senators, for a service member who loses his or her life in combat can leave this exemption to their spouse. And that's an exemption that we provide underneath the statute that is referenced here to allow for a property tax exemption. If there is no spouse, however, there is nothing that goes to the family. And I thought that was not right. And so I bring you this bill. And what the bill basically does, it says, if there is no spouse and a service member loses their life, that the state of Wyoming will step up. And if you look over on page 2, we say that it can go or to the surviving parents if there is no surviving spouse. Surviving parents who are divorced and living separately may both qualify separately for the exemption. There are conforming amendments which take care of the rest of that section of law. The amendment comes in at the bottom of page 3 over there in paragraph H. And what that was, fellow senators, was a recommendation from our legal staff, just a little bit of rewording. You can see where it doesn't change much. And with that in mind, I would, Mr. Chairman, move standing committee amendment. I think it has been moved. My apologies.
No, it has not been moved. It's been read.
I would move standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 102. That is the change represented in that standing committee. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'd call for the question on the standing committee amendment.
Standing committee amendment. Any discussion on the standing committee amendment? Any discussion, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 102, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That Standing Committee Amendment has passed.
Mr. Chairman, that's the gist of the bill. I'd be happy to visit more about it or, offline or here, but I hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion on Senate File 102? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Papps's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 102, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. That bill has squeaked by the Senate. If Senate File 102 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Next bill for your consideration is Senate File 58. The reading clerk will read that in, please.
Senate File 58, Elimination of Sales Tax on Firearms, an act relating to sales and use tax, sponsored by Senator Olson, was referred to Committee Number 3, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. No, Senator Case. Senator McEwen, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Olson?
Well, it is actually Senator McEwen's motion. Came out of his.
Not now. It's all yours now.
Okay. Well, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 58 do pass. There is no standing committee amendment, and I will turn over the explanation of this bill to myself.
All right. Go ahead.
Fellow senators, I bring you Senate File 58. This bill, what it does is eliminate the sales tax on firearms and ammunition. I bring it to you for really two compelling reasons. The first is that I believe, and many of you I'm sure share this belief with me, that owning a firearm for self-defense or hunting or sport, whatever it may be, it's a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution, our Second Amendment right, as well as the Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Section 24. And because it is fundamental, we should make it as affordable as possible for the average Wyomingite. And secondly, whether we like it or not, taxes tend to be a facilitator of public policy. And what I mean by that is that the way that we tax, or in this case, the way that we choose not to tax something, sends a clear message of how we feel about that property or that entity or that right as Wyomingites. And so I think Wyoming has an opportunity to hold itself out to be a very pro-Second Amendment state by eliminating the sales tax. A few things to note. Number one, there is no excise tax in the state of Wyoming, so the only tax that takes place on a sale of a firearm or ammunition is the sales tax. There is a federal excise tax of 10% on pistols and revolvers, and an excise tax of 11% on other firearms and ammunition. So we can't change that federal tax, but we most certainly can change the Wyoming state tax. Something else to consider is that no state has eliminated the tax on firearms, so we would be the first. There are a few states that have put in place holidays, tax breaks for certain periods of time to encourage the economic incentive of purchasing firearms. We would be doing something greater than that. We would be encouraging the sale of firearms and ammunitions year-round. I also think that manufacturers of guns and ammo will look to this when they look at our state and they consider whether they should relocate to our state. How friendly we are to our firearms is certainly a message that we send loud and clear to them. There are states that are moving in the wrong direction currently that are putting in place excise taxes, and I think we have an opportunity to show just the complete opposite of that through this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I'll walk you briefly through the bill. That on page 1, section 1, we walk through Title 39, which is taxation and revenue, and it provides exemptions on sales and services for tangible personal property as an economic incentive. And then what it does is it specifically lists out ammunition and firearms as defined in the Crimes and Offenses Title VI. You'll note that for the purposes of this bill, Mr. Chairman, ammunition is defined as any projectile expelled by action of an explosive from a firearm, and it shall not include a projectile designed to pierce armor. We don't touch the definition of ammunition. We use the exact definition as it comes out of Title VI. And then for firearm, we also don't touch the definition. It is the definition in Title VI, which I will read that to you, and it is any weapon which will or is designed to expel a projectile by the action of an explosion, not a rocket or a grenade launcher. That's the definition. This bill goes into effect July 1st, 2025, and that's the bill, Mr. Chairman.
There is a committee of the whole amendment. Do we want to, are you going to talk on the bill? You want to talk on the bill?
I was going to talk.
Yep. Senator Kolb, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the bringer of the bill, does this have any negative effects on the Pittman Roberts money that we may receive from the feds? I don't know. I just would like to get an answer. And then I'm very displeased that it doesn't include armor-piercing rounds, which affects me greatly, but I'm happy to ask the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Senator Kolb. Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just on the bill, you guys, we have, it's very fascinating to me because we spent a couple days talking about how bad property taxes are and how we'd like to get rid of property taxes. And then now at the same time, we're trying to get rid of all our sales taxes. And we just need to understand here, this is not like some states that put a extra tax on firearm sales in order to discourage firearm sales or to fund different things regarding firearms. We're fair and square. It's just that we need sales tax revenues to run the state of Wyoming. Property taxes are totally local taxes, and we've talked about their distribution. Sales taxes disproportionately benefit our cities and towns. A little less gets distributed to our counties. With property tax, it's kind of the opposite because counties get 12 mills, cities and counties get 8 mills. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm just making the point that if we keep getting rid of sales taxes on items, we're lowering the amount of money available for other things. Sales tax revenue is indeed shared with the state. And we talked about that distribution this morning on another bill. There are other efforts proceeding through this legislature to eliminate more sales taxes. Some of them are quite substantial. And we had one today in another committee that was over $40 million. So it's a big deal to eliminate sales taxes. I realize the fundamental nature of firearms and the right to have firearms. But we tax lots and lots of things. And we keep our taxes low, and we use it to provide services to our citizens. Now, we have more exemptions in other states, so that the state like the one directly, our good friend from Devil's Tower, if he were to head east about maybe 40, 50 miles, he'd be in another state. That state also has about the same sales tax rate that we have, but they don't have near the exemptions we have. We have a lot of exemptions. So their sales tax is very powerful and actually brings in more money, even though it's about the same rate as Wyoming's. I don't see a big policy reason to eliminate the sales tax on goods. It's better to have sales taxes broadly applied and at low rates. So I hope you resist this effort. It's not a comment on Second Amendments. It is not. It's comment how we're going to keep funding the state of Wyoming.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On for this bill. I think the fiscal note on this is not real extreme, and I think it's, in essence, economic development. It's a lot of people shop up in Montana because they don't have a sales tax up there. A lot of people might be coming here and buying candy bars and stuff just to buy their guns and their ammo. So we might get a little push there too. So I think this is a small step forward, or, getting our God-given right to bear arms and not have the government infringe on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There is a Committee of the Whole amendment, and could we read that in now?
Senate File 58, Committee of the Whole Amendment, number 1, page 1, line 2, after.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 on Senate File 58 and ask for your favorable consideration. Would just remind me, the Second Amendment doesn't specify firearms. And at the time that it was ratified, it says bear arms. Arms doesn't necessarily mean guns. It was all-encompassing. And at the time, there were such things as swords, lances, pickets. Routinely, there was archery equipment all across this country, bared by both our European and early settlers, but particularly by the Native American tribes. So in the context at the time, arms was much broader than just guns. And so if we're going to meet the full intent of the Second Amendment, I think we ought to broaden that to what currently we would consider as very common arms, which include archery equipment. And so, Mr. Chairman, all the amendment does is provide that same tax exemption for archery equipment, as defined in this statute. That would include bows, crossbows, arrows, bolts, arrow points, and broadheads, synonymous with both guns and ammunition. And so would stand for any questions. If there's no questions, I would ask for your favorable consideration to encompass all of our Second Amendment rights to bear arms.
Questions on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1? Questions on Committee of the Whole? Senator Case.
We need sales tax revenue to fund the state of Wyoming. It's one area that has a bright future. It's a transactional tax, which a lot of people believe is a fairer tax than a property-based tax. I hope you'll resist trying to broaden these exemptions. Vote no on the amendment.
Comments on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1? Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1. Senator Landon.
Well, like we used to say around the corral, easy, big fella. Whoa, now, easy. Let's take a deep breath here. I think maybe we walk before we run. Keep our eye on the ball. I think this is a good step in the bill. I think this kind of muddies the waters, and I would ask you to vote no on the amendment. Thank you.
Other discussion on the amendment, on the Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All in favor of the Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File something, Senate File 58, signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The Standing Committee, or Committee of the Whole Amendment passes. The Committee of the Whole. Back to the bill. Senate File 58. Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to address some of the questions and some of the concerns raised by the body. The first question dealt with, from the good senator from Sweetwater County, the Pittman-Robertson Act and money that is rebated. I'm not very familiar with the money that flows back to the state, but what I do know is that act is what I was discussing earlier when I was talking about the excise tax. That act puts in place the 10 and 11% excise tax. So that's from the federal government. So if I had, my gut would tell me that this bill would not affect that flow of money in any way. But I'll continue to look into that and offline, hopefully get an answer to the good senator that satisfies him. As far as the elimination on the sales tax conversation from the good senator from Fremont County and the need to fund our state, there's a couple of things I would just leave you with as you're considering this legislation. The first is that, a comparison was made to legislation we considered earlier with a $40 million hit. The last time a fiscal note was done on this legislation was in 2013. And what they found was based on about $9 million in sales, there was a couple $100,000 that was lost to locals. So I don't know what the sales are today, and unfortunately, our good department that oversees revenue could not estimate that either, but I think it's pretty minimal. It's not gonna be in the millions, it's gonna be in the hundreds of thousands. So I think you can take some comfort in knowing that no one's gonna go belly up from this. And then I do wanna stress, I think it does actually have the potential to increase sales tax because firearms are sold in sporting goods stores a lot of the times. And sales that takes place on coolers and clothing and everything else in that sporting goods store is gonna generate sales tax for the community and for the state of Wyoming. So just know that if we encourage sales across states, I think it has the potential to actually help us a little bit too. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask for your favorable consideration of this Senate file.
Other discussion on Senate File 58? Other discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I guess I would ask for an attempt at coming up with a value for what the fiscal note is for this. I actually just spent some time trying to come up with that, see if I could find any data, look at the excise taxes that we were discussing. And it's a bit of a struggle, but the idea of passing a bill with an unknown fiscal note that provides a sales and use tax exemption, I think that's a little bit sketchy for us to be going down. When I look at what the excise tax provides, right, that 10% or 11% tax actually provides $16 million back to the state. And I'm not entirely sure yet what that covers. It certainly covers firearms and ammunition. What I can't find yet, honestly, is whether it covers other things. But the idea that it's only a few $100,000, I guess, surprises me based on many of the people I know and what the firearms and ammunition they buy in a year cost and how much they spend. This just is not aligned with my reality that there are people out there struggling to buy guns. It seems like it's robust in the state of Wyoming. We are the state with the most guns per capita. Over 66% of adults in the state of Wyoming have a firearm. I just don't feel like it's a struggle that we're trying to resolve. And again, I guess I would point to my friends and family to indicate that it doesn't seem like a substantial challenge to acquire a firearm in the state of Wyoming. And I don't think sales tax is appearing to hold anyone back. It might change, how many features and bells and whistles and additional interesting components are purchased at the same time upon initial purchase. Maybe it holds that back by 4, 5, or 6% at that moment, but I just don't see how this is going to change anything. But once again, I do see how it is winnowing away at our tax base, right? There are lots of resources that are purchased on a daily basis by Wyomingites that are fundamental to our rights. There are lots of required and essentials. I would argue, for example, that food is even of greater importance than firearms. If you were giving me a choice between purchasing food or firearms, I would start with food before buying the firearms. It's a survival instinct, Mr. Chairman. And yet, we put taxes back on food. And again, that's not alone. There are so many essentials to our existence, and we could each come in here with a piece of legislation that provides a tax exemption on something that's essential. We could make a strong case for it. It would be very populist. Everyone would love it because it reduces taxes, and we like whatever that thing is. Chocolate, for example. We all purchased a great deal of chocolate over the last couple of days. I know I did. Right? We could exempt that. Everyone in here would be happy, and our kind friend who was walking the hallways would be even happier. So, Mr. Chairman, these are the kinds of bills that are hard to vote no on, even if they're really bad ideas, because we all like firearms, we all like lower taxes. It's like the best bill ever, but it doesn't make it good public policy, and it doesn't help the people of Wyoming.
Other comments? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just to answer, Mr. Chairman, if I may answer my colleague from Sweetwater County, Pittman Roberts taxes are paid by the manufacturers or the importers, It's not the purchaser of the firearms, so on that aspect, and it's only on firearms, ammunition, oh, and that other one, archery equipment. And that's what Pittman Roberts funds are paid on, but they're paid by the manufacturer or the importer or the distributor, not by, so it has absolutely no impact. And in fact, it may actually increase those Pittman Roberts taxes because we're gonna be selling a lot more archery equipment and firearms. And so those federal excise taxes will still be paid.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd first like to state to the body, if I have a gun, I can get food, just to be real clear about that. More importantly, though, and I, just thinking about this, and it's really something that is missing here in the conversation. I don't know if anyone's bought a firearm, but the optics will cost you more than the firearm. Rest assured. I mean, there's maybe an exception or two, but you'll spend thousands for a scope. You'll spend a lot of money for all those extra parts that go on there, and they're not exempt on here. So I think it will be an economic driver for selling more accessories, and you can basically double the price of the gun with the optics. I mean, easily done, and beyond that. But I'll just say for the average weapon, an AR of some sort, you'll spend more on that. So I think there's a lot more to it than you first might think about it, because it seems like, yeah, we're getting a break on sales tax for firearms. But in fact, the accessories and everything else that's gonna drive that final gun purchase I think will make up for that. I mean, certainly will make up for that. And it'll put sales here in the state of Wyoming. So people will come here. We're trying to have a state shooting sports complex. We have gun manufacturers here. We are trying to be that place where we're gun friendly in the United States. So I think it's a positive thing and on and for the bill.
Other discussion on the bill, Senate File 58. Other discussion. Senator Olson.
Just wanted to address my good friend from the Ivory Tower. I did purchase chocolate on at least 2 occasions in the Capitol, and I'm pretty sure I didn't pay sales tax on it.
Any other discussion? Senator McCune.
I sell candy bars. Rest assured, you're not paying sales tax on them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion on Senate File 58? Any other discussion? Sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Senator Olson's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 58, say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. That bill has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 24. Will the reading clerk please read that in?
Senate File 24, Special License Plate for Multi-Purpose Vehicles, an act relating to motor vehicle registration, sponsored by Senator Barlow, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Brennan, Cooper, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Pappas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 24, Special License Plates for Multi-Purpose Vehicles. I would ask you to call on Senator Barlow for the presentation of this bill.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the body. Like many of you, I get requests from constituents along the way, and this was one that was pretty hard for me to turn away from. So this is the fact that in Wyoming, we have 13 specialty license plates, and only one of those license plates is allowed on a multi-purpose vehicle. So what is a multi-purpose vehicle? A multi-purpose vehicle has 4 wheels or more touching the ground, weighs between 300 and 3,000 pounds. It has a seat or a saddle height of 24 inches or greater, and it has a VIN number, a unique identifier stamped on it somewhere. So what are we talking about? What does that mean to you and I? It means ATVs and UTVs, or side-by-sides. In our current statutes, you can get a license, you can put any of those specialty license plates, including POW, Pearl Harbor, Army Guard, Air Guard, Purple Heart, Veteran, Firefighter, UW, EMT, Gold Star, Tribal, both tribes, Wildlife Conservation, and organ, eye, and tissue donor on any vehicle except a multi-purpose vehicle and a commercial vehicle. So the gentleman that came to me was a Vietnam veteran, said, Eric, I was down, I wanted to put these vehicles, my veteran license plate on my UTV that I use in town every day. In fact, he drives it to church in the summer months, and street legal, obviously. And they said they couldn't help me, and the legislature would have to fix it. So he said, that's why I came to you. So I'm bringing this to you, my colleagues, that we can adjust the law just for multi-purpose vehicles and allow all the specialty plates to be allowed to be placed on them. All the ones that I listed out. The one that is currently allowed on a multi-purpose vehicle is a disabled veteran one. That's in current statute. So that's the one exception out of all of our current specialty plates. This does not create a new plate. There will be no printing of a new plate. They're simply going to take the motorcycle plate, which is authorized for all these different categories of specialty plates, and utilize it as a UTV or ATV plate. So administratively, the agency responsible for printing the plates said this is very doable. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to walk you through the bill if there are questions, but the list that I read out of all the different specialty plates is basically what the bill does. It goes in and crosses out 2 words or adds them in as appropriate. There is a standing committee amendment. Could I have that read in, please?
Senate File 24, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 9, line 16, delete.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 24, and ladies and gentlemen, ask for your favorable consideration. This is a changing in the effective date, and the change in the effective date was at the suggestion and request of the Wyoming, the folks that handle the license plates and have them manufactured on behalf of the state of Wyoming, our State Department, and they said because they're going through a change in their computer system, et cetera, and they expect it to be completed sometime this summer, initiating the start date for this would be much more convenient for them from a logistical perspective if it were January 1st, 2026. So that's the amendment. I'd stand for any questions on the amendment. Mr. Chairman.
Questions on the amendment? Questions on the amendment? Questions on the amendment? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator Barlow's motion to adopt the Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That amendment has passed the Committee of the Whole. Back to the bill. Sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Senator Pappas's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 24, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. That Senate File 24 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate Joint Resolution 1. Can we read that joint resolution in?
Senate Joint Resolution 1, Convention of States, a joint resolution requesting Congress to call a convention for proposing amendments to the United States Constitution as specified, sponsored by Senator Barlow. Was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Craigo, Crum, Hicks, Cole, Van Olson, Senator Olson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the joint resolution. What is your pleasure, Senator Olson?
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate Joint Resolution 1 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I will turn over the explanation of the resolution to the good animal doctor from Campbell County.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Esteemed colleagues, the 68th Legislature, I bring to you Senate Joint Resolution 1, Convention of States. It was just last week, Tuesday of last week, that new members of this body stood right up here in front of us. The Chief Justice stood right here, and we took an oath of office. Took an oath of office to the Constitution of this country, the United States of America, and to the state of Wyoming. My bringing this forward with my colleagues that are co-sponsors, and I'm sure, and many others, including the grassroots of folks in Wyoming, is about honoring that part of our Constitution, Article 5, and upholding Article 5, and a unique thing that only the legislatures of the several states can do, and that is put in a call for a convention to amend the United States Constitution. So this resolution before you is exactly that. I will briefly walk through the resolution and then seat and stand for questions as they may come. So what you have for page 1 is why folks would want, the whereases, the concerns that we have, the grievances that we may have, and we may disagree with some or may disagree or agree with more of them or fewer or more of them, but these are the kind of laying the foundation, the findings. But then we get to section 1, page 2, line 16, ladies and gentlemen. And these are the three things that this resolution is notifying Congress and applying to Congress on for calling a convention to amend the U.S. Constitution. Line 21, impose fiscal restraints. What is our national deficit? 34 trillion, counting. If we had the basic tenets of our Wyoming Constitution, we would never even be close to this. We have fiscal restraints in the Wyoming Constitution. The second one starts on line 21 and goes to line 22. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. We just had a bill that talked about that. We were discussing whether we need 2/3 or a majority vote of a council that's within this body, and how much money we needed to actually protect our rights, the rights of the state, the rights of this legislature to act beyond this state. So this is one of those things, we know there are overreaches from our federal government, and we ourselves are trying to empower ourselves to be able to do that. So this is another one. We know they're overstepping, we can take some action. This is another way to take some action. And then finally, when you go to the third page, you'll see another thing that there's also another resolution on coming before this body, and that's the terms of federal officers and members of Congress, quote unquote term limits. Let's be clear, that says members of Congress per se, but you could, office of federal officials, that could be the judiciary, that could be the folks that are in the executive branch, the bureaucrats, the appointees, et cetera. So we can limit the influence they have over time in our federal government. So those are the three topics that this particular application has in it. There are others. You're going to see one that's single, 2 term limits. There are others out there. But I want to be clear, the reason I support this is because I trust the Constitution. I trust the safeguards that the founders put in the Constitution for the calling of a convention for proposing amendments. We know there's another way, and it's been used 27 times, 10 en masse with the first amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and then 17 times successively subsequent to that. There have been unsuccessful attempts, and that's the safeguards. When the states don't agree, if they don't agree, and 13 states can veto anything that would come out of a convention of this matter, or out of Congress in the way that it's been done till now. So ladies and gentlemen, if you will, quickly, this power resides only in the legislatures of the several states. The states in this republic, I'm not going to go through it line by line, each state in this republic gets 1 vote by this very resolution. If it went to a proportional or a popular vote type status, our participation would be rescinded. It would not be authorized for the delegates to participate in a convention that did anything but 1 state, 1 vote, consistent with this republic. The convention, as you know, can only be called by a vote of 2/3 of the states. That's 34 states in our current configuration of 50 states, 34 states. So the question is, where are we at now? We're at 19 states have adopted, 9 states are considering it right now. 1 state is a chamber ahead of us, so we could be the 21st state if they stay ahead of us. We could pass them if we want to speed this along. But that's where we are. We're in that 21st, so 13 more states. We could see this year or next year become a reality for this nation. As you note, as you read the rest of the context, the Congress can only do 2 things: set the topic and call for the convention. Everything else is left to the states, the state legislatures. That's this body for this state. We'll go page 4. As I said, in the middle of page 4, I just want to be clear so folks see this part. Line 16 to 17. 1 state, 1 vote. No dilution by this populous states on the seaboards. Every state of this republic gets equal representation at a convention. Next thing we'd go down to on page 5 is the ratification. The ratification in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution is for 3/4 of the states. 3/4 of the states, as our current configuration of 50 states in this republic, is 38 states. Let's take it the other way. It was mentioned on a previous bill. This is what gets you this percentage, but let's flip it. 13 states disagreeing or not taking up a potential amendment to the Constitution kills it. It's done. That's the ultimate safety. That is where the convention, you hear concerns about a runaway. The convention runs away, gets foolish. There's 2 mechanisms. The state withdraws, the legislature withdraws their appointees, says we're not participating. That obviously lowers the threshold for the folks participating. The second one is we don't call a convention, or we don't actually ratify what comes out of it because we don't believe in what they've done. And we're part of the 13 that pushes back on something that is deleterious to our state. I would say this, I want to be clear, on top of page 5, there are concerns about, well, what will this mean for our Second Amendment rights? We just had a bill talking about that. Our First Amendment rights, 7th, etc. Anything would be out of order, top of page 5, to consider anything with our Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments of our Constitution. Another suspender, belt and suspender, to protect those things most dear to us. I'll close by saying this is a continuing application, means it'll stay on the books if we adopt it until this legislature withdraws it. And Mr. Chairman, it's to be sent to, of course, the executive of the United States and the Congress there, and of course to our own delegation. And I'd stand for any questions, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Any questions for Senator Barlow on Senate Joint Resolution 1? Seeing none and sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Senator Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate Joint Resolution 1, say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. I'm not sure. Let's have a division here. All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. Oh. That resolution has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our pleasure today is Senate File 9. Would you please read that in?
Senate File 9, Restoration of Rights Amendments, an act relating to criminal procedure sponsored by the Judiciary Committee. Was referred to Committee Number 1, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Craigo, Crum, Kolb, and Olson. No, Senator Hicks. Senator Olson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Senator Olson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 9 do pass. This Senate file does have a standing committee amendment, and I would ask to have that read in at this time.
Senate File 9, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 9, delete.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I will turn over the explanation of the bill along with that standing committee amendment to the good country lawyer.
Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 9 this time because I'm going to be discussing it as we walk through the bill. So happy to bring to you, good senators, Senate File 9, Restoration of Rights Amendments. A few years ago, we passed a bill, passed a law out of this body, out at both bodies, providing for the restoration of rights and pertaining to use and possession of firearms. And we added some language to our statutes. Prior to that, we had restoration of rights for voting rights, but not for those rights related to firearms. And when we did that, and let me back up just a second. Prior to that, under the law at that time, you could acquire your voting rights back for convictions from other states. You could also acquire them, obviously, for convictions in this state. Well, when we did that, we also applied the firearms provision to the convictions of other states, and also to federal law. Well, since that time, and some of you may remember, we had constituents last year receiving letters from our good friends in the federal government about some of these certificates issued by our Department of Corrections in this realm. And so essentially the feds sent a letter out saying, we're not going to honor those certificates as they pertain to convictions from the federal government or from other states. But they made no mention of the firearms certificates for convictions in our state. So what we did in the interim committee is we went back, and as the bill's currently written, as it sets in front of you, and I'll get into the amendment in a second, but as it sets before you right now, what it did, the original bill simply stripped out any reference to convictions from other states or the federal government. It only would allow the certificates, whether it be for voting or for firearms, to be issued for convictions related or for convictions that happened in Wyoming. And so, and I'm just going to walk through the bill and then we'll go through the amendment when we get there. But if it's actually quite long, and there's a lot of conforming amendments in there. It's actually pretty simple, but I'll get to the relevant provisions as we walk through it. So on page 2, as we walk through the bill, these are conforming amendments. And you'll see on line 16 and 17, it says subject to subsections H and J of this section. And that's the important part of the bill, and we will get there in a minute. But that's the new part of the law that we added in this bill. Top of page 3, same thing. Then there's a housekeeping amendment on lines 12 through 16, and you'll see some new language, and it says, and before conviction, the person had the right to vote or would have had the right to vote upon attaining the age of 18 years. And what we discovered, because this really increased the amount of people requesting these certificates, is you would not actually have to be a citizen to get your restoration of rights. And so we were having people apply that didn't actually qualify. So this is just making clear that you actually have to be a citizen prior to receiving the certificate back. So that's a housekeeping amendment just to make it clear for everyone. And that was requested by our Department of Corrections. Moving on down through page 4, and this is where we get into, we're on line 11, after line 10, this is where we start getting into the heart of the amendment. And if you have your amendment out too, you'll see on lines 10 through 17 of the amendment, we essentially put in what would have been the repealer at the end of this particular bill draft. And so what we're doing is we're putting back in the convictions of other states, but only as it pertains to voting rights. So if you get a conviction, felony conviction in another state, you can still apply for your voting rights if you meet all of the other qualifications. You would not be able to apply for restoration of your gun rights, however. Moving on down, you'll see there's some more conforming language there on page 4. Moving to page 5. Again, lines 9 through 14, that's part of the amendment, if you have your amendment in front of you. And so we're taking out lines 9 through 14 in the bill and replacing them with lines 21 through 25 in the amendment. And just a little bit of fill in here a little bit. What we decided in committee and why this amendment is so long is we wanted to make sure that if you have a conviction in another state, you can still apply for your restoration of voting rights. However, we're delineating those out and accepting out the gun rights, from your firearm rights for restoration of rights. And so that's why this amendment is quite long. We have to go back in and clean all of that up. Moving down through page 5 in the bill, we have more conforming language there on lines 16 and 17. Turning the page 6, same thing on lines 12 and 13. And then on lines 19 through 22 on page 6, that is also a housekeeping amendment. And you'll notice down there we added the words explosives because that's in that federal agency's formal name. Another housekeeping amendment, top of page 7, which on lines 4 and 5, there we're notifying the Division of Criminal Investigation, which technically I think we were doing before, but we did not have statutory direction to do so. So now the department will do that as well. And then here's really the heart of the new bill, of the new language, which is subsections H and J. So H is simply saying, if you receive another felony conviction after receiving your certificate here in the state of Wyoming, and it does not matter where that conviction takes place, whether it's a federal or state law, your certificate is null and void, and you lose your rights that were restored to you under the certificate. Down on J, and this is also the heart really of the amendment. We replaced the sections down under paragraph J. So starting on lines, I believe it is line 18. 18 through 23 on that page are stricken, and lines 1 through 3 on the top of page 8 are stricken. And all of that is replaced with the language at the bottom of page 1 on your amendment. And then just one last thing, and I mentioned this earlier, on the second page of your amendment at the very top, line 2, page 8, line 13, that is your repealer, and we are actually taking out the repealer. We're deleting the repealer because we put it back in and exchanged it with some different language. And so this area of the law, I will tell you, is in this particular statute is complicated, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so there's a lot in there, and I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer any of those, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is changing who can apply for a restoration of their gun rights so that we're not getting our citizens in trouble. We're not giving rights back that are going to get them in trouble with our federal agencies, and we've seen some of that in the newspaper in the last couple weeks, actually. So that's the problem we're trying to solve, and hopefully this bill does that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stand for any questions.
Questions on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Any questions on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Any questions? Hearing no questions, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator, I think it was Crago, wasn't it? Motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 9, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say no. That amendment has passed the Committee of the Whole. Now we're on to the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Any discussion on the bill? Sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Senator Olson's, we had one, or two. Senator Hutchings, I'm sorry.
No problem, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Question on page 7, the H and J section, where it says, let me get down to a line, maybe line, let me see, the certificate, 10. The certificate shall automatically be void and all rights are deemed restored by the certificate shall no longer be deemed restored if, let me see, if a person shall only be eligible for a certificate of restoration of rights under this section as follows. If they are convicted of a felony in the state of Wyoming, or if they are convicted of a nonviolent felony or nonviolent felonies arising out of the same name occurrence. It just seems like you're saying, and I could be wrong, I could be looking at it wrong, that if they're guilty of a felony, they can get their rights back. Am I reading it just the opposite or what? Thank you. It's confusing.
Senator Craigo, you have an answer for Senator Hutchings?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's two different types, so if you, and you have to have your green book out to see this, but under subsection A of the statute, those are actually rights that are granted back by the governor, our chief executive, excuse me, himself or herself. And so there's a different classification. So it can be any felony under subsection A. Those felonies that are subject or allowed a certificate of restoration of rights under the other subsections have to be non-violent felonies. And so that's why there's different terminology in there. That's a great question and a good catch. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Schuler, did you have a question? I saw you standing up, but now you're back in the break room. Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also was just going to clarify, based on the subsection that we were reading, H, it does take away the restoration of rights if you commit a new felony. So that is the purpose of that provision.
Other questions on Senate File 58, or Senate File 9, excuse me. Senate File 9, sensing you're ready to vote, Senate File 9, all those in favor of Senator Olson's motion when the Committee of the Whole rise to report they do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 9, say aye. All opposed say no. That bill has passed the Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our viewing pleasure today is Senate File 55. Would the reading clerk please read that in?
Senate File 55, third-party filers, an act relating to registered offices and agents, sponsored by the Corporations Committee, was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman, was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Guru, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Case?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 55, third-party filers. Sir, there is a standing committee amendment, and I ask it be read in at this time.
Senate File 55, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 6, after.
And Mr. Chairman, I would move the standing committee amendment and ask that you call on the fine senator from the central part of the state, Warren Junction, and parts beyond, and he'll explain the bill and take care of the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Orange Junction, let's see here, who should I say?
Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think that might be McKinley, might be the technical term, but nobody knows where McKinley is. So thank you, Senators. Here we have a Corporations Committee bill dealing with third-party filers with our Secretary of State's office. This is part of the Secretary's initiative to combat business fraud, and basically saying that if you are somebody who files a lot of information as a registered agent with the Secretary of State's office, and you're going to have to identify who you are. The concern is that there's a lot of anonymity in this, a little bit too much, and so that if it's basically your job to do this as a registered agent, then you have to tell the Secretary who you are. So that's the basic premise of the bill. Go into what it actually does, beginning with a definition there on page 1, going on to line 2. And once again, we make that definition as anybody who has 10 or more business filings, or that'll be a little bit later, but notably here, and this will be part of the standing committee amendment, we'll get to that in a second. Bottom of the paragraph B on page 2, we are currently in the bill exempting anybody who's an attorney or a CPA, a public accountant, the idea being that they're already registered some form or fashion in the state, and that this would be duplicative. We'll have that discussion in a minute. Going on to paragraph B, a third-party filer shall register with the Secretary of State after filing 10 documents. So the idea is that if you file more than 10 documents, you're doing this more than just maybe having a handful of businesses. As many of us do, maybe are registered agents for more than one entity. Maybe you have several businesses, maybe you help out with a nonprofit. So that's the idea behind 10 there, to make sure we catch the folks who are doing this for a living. So going on to page 3, these third-party filers shall obtain registration. You see the longer list of the things they have to fill out with the Secretary, including a valid state-issued driver's license or identification card. You have a filing fee of up to $50 that they would have to pay. And that requirement go on to page 4 to notify the Secretary if there's any changes in the information that they originally filed with. We have a penalty of up to $500 on the middle of page 4, and a provision to ensure that these records will remain confidential. Rulemaking authority, and currently a $100,000 appropriation for one-time software updates. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I think probably best just to go right into the standing committee amendment, if that's okay. So I'll move standing committee amendment number 1, Senate File 55, and ask for advice favorable consideration. Senators, what this amendment does is 2 things. First of all, it deletes the exemption for attorneys and CPAs. So they would have to file or register the same as everybody else. The idea that there'd be parity there, I think that's the discussion that we had in committee, that we shouldn't be carving out exemptions if you're requiring folks to register. If you have more than 10 entities, then that should be consistent throughout the board. We also heard from an update from the Secretary that in fact the appropriation should not be $100,000, it should be $150,000. This is an update after talking with our software vendor. That's actually a more appropriate appropriation. So that's the standing committee amendment, 2 concepts in there, and I'd love to answer any questions we have of that.
Questions on standing committee amendment number 1, Senate File Olson. Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to request a division on this amendment. I would make division 1, lines 1 through 4, and division 2, lines 5 through 9.
Is there any objection to that division? Any objection? Any objection? Hearing none, let's go with the division.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll take up division 1 first, if you
All
don't
right.
mind. Okay, so I'd ask you to defeat this division and this part of the amendment. I was on the fraud working group where this legislation originated, and the original intent of what we were doing here was providing an exemption for attorneys and CPAs. And it's not because, I'm not it's not because they're attorneys and CPAs that we just say they're exempt. It's because attorneys are bound by laws of ethics, rules of ethics, very, actually more stringent than what this bill would actually provide. So and CPAs have their own rules as well. So there's not a need to create a so-called parity because they're already bound by much stricter rules. I don't think that the amendment's necessary, and I would urge you to defeat it.
Okay, Division 1 of the Senate File 55, Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Division 1. Any more discussion on Division 1? Lines 1 through 4. Hearing none, sensing we're ready to vote. All those in favor of Division 1 for Senate File 55, Senate File 55, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Division 1, signify by saying aye.
Point of order, Chairman.
Oh, wait,
I want to
Smith.
understand what we're voting exactly. We're voting on.
Wait a minute, Mr. Smith. There, here you
Point of
go.
order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We're voting, we're voting, it's been divided, we're voting to divide it, or?
No, we already divided it.
Okay, so we're voting for or against?
For or
the
against
proposed amendment.
Division 1.
Okay.
And
All right.
Division 1 is lines 1 through 4. Yes. Senator Boner.
Okay, so just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, if you vote aye, you're voting to remove the current exemption for attorneys and accountants. If you vote no, you're asking to retain it. So yes, if you support the committee's position, no, if you support my colleague from Cheyenne's position.
Did everyone get that? If you're voting aye, you're voting for the amendment, for the division?
Correct.
And okay. All right. Senator Aye.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just cleared up my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on Division 1 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator Olson's motion that the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, Division number 1 to Senate File 55, signify by saying aye. Wow, that was weak. All those opposed, no. No. Whoa, that amendment failed. The Division 1 of Senate File 55 has failed the Committee of the Whole. Senator Olson, Division 2.
Division 2, I would just say, I think this is an aye vote because based on what came out of the agency's recommendation, it seems, we thought it was appropriate at the time that we drafted it. It appears that if the agency has changed their mind on how much money they need, then I think that's appropriate too. So I would urge an aye vote.
Any discussion on Division 2? Discussion on Division 2. Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All in favor of Senator Olson's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Division 2, signify by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Division number 2 has passed Committee of the Whole. So now we're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Further discussion on the bill? Senator Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess, a little bit of discussion. So we are now going to charge additional fees separate from the filing fee for a particular document. We're now charging additional fees for what exactly? I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the bill does as far as the fee that's in the bill draft. If someone could explain that to me, that'd be great. Thank you.
Anybody want to explain that, what that bill does now? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the appropriation for one-time IT costs This would be to help compensate for the additional workload. Obviously, this is going to be another duty that the Secretary of State takes on. So this would be to help compensate for the ongoing obligations of the increased workload. Obviously, we don't know exactly what it is until we get the law implemented. That's why it's up to, there's anywhere from $1 to $50 range in the statute currently. So that's the idea behind the fee.
Senator Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm just a little confused. So is it a recurring fee? I mean, as a filer, as a third-party filer, do you just pay the fee once, or do you pay it annually? Or is it just paid until the costs of creating this system are recouped? I'm just trying to figure out, is this an ongoing tax on our people? Someone could help me on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Does anybody want to address that? Does anybody want to address that question? Senator Landon, do you want to address that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just in an effort to try to help my friend from downriver, my understanding is that each year that these third-party filers, if they reach the 10 filing limit, then that would require the registration. I think this is a yearly thing. I think the fees that will be charged by the Secretary of State would be yearly for these third-party filers. But I will do some homework and make sure on second reading I get back to everyone with the ability to underline that if it's true. So I believe that's the way I understand these to work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, I just spoke to the head of the business division at the Secretary of State's office, and I believe that to be correct based on what he said. Like a third-party registered agent files every year and pays every year, this third-party filer would need to file every year and pay every year.
Anyone else? Anyone else on Senate File 55? Senate File 55. Sensing you're ready to vote. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, they to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 55, say aye. All those opposed say no. The Senate File 55 has passed the Committee of the Whole, and the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 51. Could you read the Senate File 51, please?
Senate File 51, Wyoming Telecommunications Act revisions, an act relating to the Wyoming Telecommunications Act, sponsored by the Corporations Committee, was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, and Landon. Excused, Senator Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman, was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Carew, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 51, Wyoming Telecommunications Act revisions. Mr. Chairman, this is a partial rewrite of the Wyoming Telecommunications Act. It's a product of the interim work of the Joint Corporations Committee. The act is subject to sunset next year, and it was time that we did something about it, and so that is what the bill has done. Just by way of a top-down framework, we first passed Wyoming's original Telecommunications Act in 1996, and 2 people in this room were part of that effort to do that. And it was it was actually 1995, I'm sorry, it was the federal government that passed in 1996. It was really a well-respected effort across the country that stood the test of time and predated kind of the changes that evolved at the federal level. And it was fairly prescriptive, and led to dynamic changes in the landscape of telecommunications provision in Wyoming. Of course, since that time, Mr. Chairman, so much has changed in telecommunications. It's not the same animal that it was all those years ago. And we have all sorts of efforts, like in terms of broadband, and we don't really have telephones anymore that are just for voice. That's a thing of the past, but there are still quite a few out there, and that's what this bill deals with. It does not deal with your internet service, your broadband service, the Wyoming Broadband Authority, or anything. This is the kind of the legacy telephone lines that are out there in the state of Wyoming, not wireless, legacy telephone lines. And we still have them. They exist in places where there may not be a lot of competition, and they're the subject of this title. Also, in general terms, we subsidize some of those services across the state. We gather money from telephone customers and use it in a pool to subsidize the services of an increasingly smaller number of lines that are in rural areas that are high cost. We do that on the basis of a benchmark price that we try to meet. It's in the law at $30. We'll talk about that. It helps to provide telecommunication services, voice only, of course, in those very rural areas. There's some amendments on the bill, and a lot of it has to do, as we look through it, they're kind of tangled up a little bit, and we're going to have to unravel that a bit, Mr. Chairman. But to look ahead, it's a question of whether we want to expand the collection of the subsidy from a service called prepaid wireless and use those collections to subsidize the lines that we've talked about. So we'll get to those amendments. We'll just start with the bill, Mr. Chairman. It is a rewrite of the bill. Section 1, of course, is we can see that we're extending on page 2 from July 1st, 2025 to July 1st, 2031, 5-year extension of the sunset. We have definitions. There's a couple of new ones, just because we're actually simplifying and just kind of kicking it up. So we now have a definition of local exchange service, page 3, line F, and we can say local exchange service means residential or business service within a local exchange area capable of providing access to interexchange services provided by interexchange telecommunications companies. Next, page 4, single line flat rate or single line measured residential or business service. Transmission service and facilities necessary for connection between the end user or customer's premise and the local network switching facility, and services necessary to connect to 911 emergency services. That's basically the subject of this whole act and what we're going to regulate. And it talks about when that's competitive or not. Non-competitive essential telecommunications service means those essential telecommunications services at locations which have not been found by the legislature or the commission, that's the Public Service Commission, to be competitive. We have universal service is now defined as, instead of being essential telecom, it's actually local exchange service. And we can see we are making a definition on page 5. At the top, this is kind of an important definition that is of what broadband internet access service is, or BIAS. That's a kind of a federal term, but it means a mass market retail service by wire, radio, provide the capability to transmit data. That's your broadband service. We're not defining it for any purpose in this act, except for it is used later on when it talks about the fact that the government cannot provide broadband services without first trying to see if the private sector is interested in doing it. Lines 10 through 12, non-competitive local exchange service means local exchange service at locations which have not been found by the legislature or the commission to be competitive. And so now we're talking about in 3715-104, services regulated by the title, except to the extent otherwise provided in this section, the provisions of this title shall only apply to non-competitive essential telecommunications services. That's all that we're left that we're going to regulate. But it does say that all telecommunication services shall be subject to contributions to the Universal Service Fund. They're going to pay the subsidy under these particular statutes. Here's the exclusions on page 6. The provisions of this title do not apply to telecommunication services using the radio spectrum, cellular, or other wireless technology, except to the extent provided in these particular characteristics, which have to do with like interconnection and collection of the required assessment for universal service. We're not going to regulate cell phones. We can't regulate cell phones. It's not going to happen. We don't regulate private telecommunications networks. And as we move on to 3715-202, this is where we determine whether something is competitive or not. If it's not competitive, can be more regulation, but this is down to where they can be at certain locations. It's a smaller geography where things aren't competitive and the commission has a role to play. So if you see 3715-202, determination of competitive services, that's page 8. And we're getting it down to lines 18 and 19, that it is location specific. And you can see the bottom of the page, any location deemed to have effective competition for local exchange service shall be ineligible for Universal Service Fund support, except that a telecommunications carrier may continue to receive universal service support for non-competitive locations that supports, and that support shall account for price and cost adjustments. So we're narrowing down the areas that can be supported. Are we doing great? Want me to hurry it up? Well, basically it goes on, talks about prices, and the companies have to have notice, and on, and the 3715-404 on page 12, protection of telecommunication consumers. A telecommunications company providing a non-competitive essential telecommunications service shall not discontinue, they can't stop their service without the commission's approval, and the commission may adopt rules and regulations to provide for interconnection to other companies' networks, telephone number portability to protect people to be able to take their numbers with them if they change carriers, and down on Romanet 7, rates, terms, and conditions of wholesale service. 3715 is about complaining against prices. Most of that is just saying that now we're only dealing with essential telecommunication services. 3715-406, quality of service. Again, this is limited now to non-competitive essential telecommunications service that the commission shall be, a complaint shall be noticed and heard as provided for in the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act, and the commission may direct the telecommunications company to take whatever remedial action is technically feasible. This next section, 3715-413, that references back to the broadband services I talked about. Limitation on the authority of political subdivisions to enter exclusive agreement for provision of telecom services or broadband internet access service. So what this does is prevent your local governments from entering into exclusive internet arrangements. And it requires that, there's a whole bunch of ability to have other companies participate in those markets and show that they can do it. And that's the whole purpose of all the way through line 9 on page 19. 3715-501 on page 19 is the Universal Service Fund. And the only real change in that area is on page 20. It's in the case of prepaid wireless telecommunications access, the charge shall be imposed as provided in section J of this section. No contribution is required and no charge shall be imposed on Lifeline services provided under the federal Lifeline program. Mr. Chairman, it's kind of going to be unusual here, but and my computer went to sleep, so give me a moment. You didn't go to sleep, you guys, did you? Okay. I would like to move, I'd like to have read in Senate Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
Senate File 51, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, page 1, line 9, after.
Thank you very much. I would move Senate Standing Committee number 1, and I'll tell you how I'm going to ask you to vote in a minute, so stand by. So what we're talking about here with the Universal Service Fund, on page 20, when I mentioned that now there's going to be collections from prepaid wiring, and it's kind of a tax imposition. You can see it on page 23. Beginning July 1, 2026, for prepaid wireless telecom access charges shall be imposed on every retailer. It goes on. That's the imposition of a tax on prepaid wireless service to fund universal service. And it goes on. That's most of the bill. We need to talk about that. So we thought that this was our committee, and I've talked to the whole committee about this. We thought this was a pretty important piece. It sounded to us like the industry really wanted to collect from prepaid wireless service. So we passed an amendment that actually, Standing Committee Amendment number 1, that essentially gives money to the Department of Revenue to establish the program to collect these fees from the prepaid wireless carriers. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here because all of a sudden we're talking about a tax in the Wyoming Senate. Put that up there and we'll come back to that, okay? Taxes are supposed to start in the House. But lo and behold, the industry approached us and said, you know what? We don't really care if you tax prepaid wireless. It's not that big of a deal. And here's a fact. Who uses prepaid wireless services? They're the poorest consumers out there. They really are. They're people that have the least, and Rothfuss uses it, by the way. So, but it's a very inexpensive service. When you jump on a network, a cellular network, you find that you have less priority than other people that are paying higher rates. But it has, it's affordable, and a lot of people do it. So the thinking is, and yet this prepaid wireless service doesn't qualify for funding from the Universal Service Fund, right? So why would we tax poor people, and Senator Rothfuss, to fund access lines in rural areas that may or may not be poor? That's kind of where the gist happened. And the thing is, if we eliminate this section from the bill and don't impose it, we won't get in trouble for passing a tax in the Senate. And secondly, we won't need the Standing Committee Amendment, which is a $500,000 amendment so that the Department of Revenue can stand up a one-time program to gather those prepaid wireless. So what we can do now is we could kill the Standing Committee Amendment and come back into the bill and remove the imposition of the tax on the prepaid wireless, and pretty much everybody would be happy. How about if we discuss that first at this point?
Senator Rothfuss.
Well, I'm clearly for it.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, reluctantly, I ask, there's one line in the Standing Committee Amendment that is not related to the appropriation issue, and that's the page 4, line 18. That's a correction in a different area having to do with complaints, and that is worth enacting. So I would ask that the amendment be divided and we deal with page 4, line 18 is Division 1, and then we deal with the appropriation as Division 2. And, Mr. Chairman, while I'm on my feet, I urge us to adopt the line 4 in the amendment, page 4, line 18, which is Division 1.
Senator Scott, mine shows page 14, line
Page 14,
18.
line 18, did I say?
Is that correct?
That's right.
Oh, okay, I thought you were saying page 4.
No, if I did, Mr. Chairman, I was wrong.
Okay, page 14, line 18 will be Division 1, and the rest of the amendment will be 2, right?
That's an acceptable division, sir.
Okay, I find it divisible. Senator Smith, we don't have to vote on that. I just get to pick it. So I'm picking it. Okay, so Division 1, do you want to speak on Division 1?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Senator Case, go ahead.
I'd certainly support you voting aye on Division 1. And just a note about these divisions, we don't need a motion to make them. Masons says that in any proposition that is divisible shall be divided upon the request of a member. So we don't make motions about it, it's just, can we divide it? This is certainly divisible, and let's take care of Division number 1. I ask you to vote aye and support the committee.
Division number 1, any discussion? Division number 1. All right, division number 1. We're on division number 1 of Standing Committee Amendment 1 on Senate File 51. All in favor of that division signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign? No. Oh, it's close, but I think it passed. So Division 1 has passed Committee of the Whole. Division number 2, anybody want to speak on division number 2?
Mr. Chairman, it's very unusual, but I have the support of my committee on this. We talked about this after the industry approached us and said we really don't need to do this. So I would ask that you vote no on division number 2 of the Standing Committee Amendment.
Division number 2, any more discussion on division number 2? Huh? Division 2 is all the rest of the everything else. Division number 1 was this. Division number 2 is everything else. Okay, division number 2. Sensing you're ready to vote, division number 2 to Standing Committee Amendment 1, Senate File 51. All those in favor signify by saying what? Aye. Really? He's that good? All those opposed say no?
No.
Oh, all right, that one, Senate. Division number 2 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Senate File 51 did not pass. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just to remind everybody, when we're presenting or debating bills, twice in the last presentation, there was a reference to a senator by their exact name, and that's kind of outside the way we do things here in the Senate. So just to remind everybody, Mr. Chairman, that that's kind of out of order.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Case, are you going to explain some cow amendments?
I will, Mr. Chairman, to address the point of order. You know, that's actually not a rule, and it's a courtesy, and it's usually used to keep us from avoiding directly talking about people and to negatively refer to people. I meant it to be positive in the extreme, and but it was in bad taste on my part, and I will accept the admonition. Thank you very much. So now, Mr. Chairman, to try to unwrap a couple of things here, there are 2 Committee of the Whole amendments brought by myself. Is it possible to take them out of order? Would you mind if we took up Committee of the Whole Amendment 2 first and have it read in?
Let's, committee of the whole amendment number 2, let's read that in first.
Senate File 51, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2, delete.
And Mr. Chairman, I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2. And what this does is, if we would have passed that last amendment, it would have deleted the appropriation, but we don't worry about that part. LSL will work that out. But it actually deletes the imposition of the tax on prepaid wiring, beginning on page 23, prepaid wireless and through that section. So I'd ask that you approve that amendment, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2.
Discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2. Discussion. Hearing, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, you're deleting the entirety of the Universal Service Fund. Is that a correct understanding of the amendment, Mr. Chairman?
You want an answer, Senator Scott? Yeah. Senator Case, do you want to answer that, please?
I'll tell you what I'd like to do. What I'd like to get at with this amendment is to delete the imposition on prepaid wireless. It may delete a little bit more than that, which we need to have the rest of that bill in there because there are other changes. There's some, I would withdraw this amendment for now, and we'll fix it up on second reading. Always appreciate my tall, fine colleague from Natrona County, especially on this issue. He's sharp as a tack. So could I withdraw that amendment without objection?
Without objection, we're going to withdraw
number 2.
Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to Senate File 51. So withdrawn. Back to Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 on Senate File 51.
Could we have that read in?
Senate File 51, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 9 after.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, Senate File 51. This is also a divisible amendment, but right now, under the law, under our Universal Service Fund, the a location can have multiple lines subsidized by the Universal Service Fund. So you could have, a household could have 2 lines, they each get a subsidy. This has been a little bit of contention over the years, but this says you can only get 1 line at a particular location. It would also apply to business. So you could get from the Universal Service Fund a subsidized line, only your first line, not your second line. The other part of what this amendment does is take the benchmark of $30 and raises it to $40. We haven't touched that benchmark since the last rewrite and maybe even before. So it's been 5 years. So that's the amendment. It could be divisible. You could deal with the benchmark and the number of lines. We could do it all at once, vote it all up, or vote it down. I urge your support.
Discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 51. Any discussion? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote, all in favor of Senator Case's motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 51, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? That's close, but it passed. That passed the Committee of the Whole. Now, we are back to the bill. Senate File 51.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
That is the bill. We still have that piece about the imposition on prepaid wireless, and I totally agree we should remove that now, especially since we've taken away the money that's going to go to the Department of Revenue. It's also a good reason to remove it because it is the imposition of a fee or a tax, if you will, by the Senate. Otherwise, we'll get that on second reading. Stand ready to answer any questions. If not, I call for the question.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to ask a question for my own edification and clarification. It's been my understanding that this bill is a surcharge on every single person in the state of Wyoming. I'll just say my constituents, say, living in the city where I'm at, 24,000 folks. I understand they're going to pay the surcharge, and I would like to know what benefit they get from this surcharge being levied. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cole. Any other questions about Senate File 51? Any other questions? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, to answer that question, it is designed to give us a universal telephone system. And there are areas, rural areas, where the service is both expensive and there isn't adequate competition. And so what you're doing is you're preserving a universal service. That's the whole point of it, so that we don't have people that are essentially losing all the telecommunication service. And it means your customers have the ability to reach those people, and if their businesses have the ability to take calls from those people and do business with them that way.
Other discussion, Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that means we're subsidizing the rest of the state of Wyoming, just to be clear. I just want everyone to know that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cole. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's kind of accurate, but we're all subsidizing. All our higher dense areas are subsidizing the rural areas. The total amount of subsidy per year works out to be about almost $2 million that goes to fund the services and will be the essential non-competitive services in these very rural areas. And it's expensive to serve out there, but this keeps their, under the bill, the idea was to keep their rate at $30. With the amendment you just passed, you might have cut that in half and gone from nearly $2 million to under $1 million in annual subsidies. Seems like an appropriate movement forward. The truth is, Mr. Chairman, the telecom industry is changing. We've had a hard time finding technologies that work in rural areas that are cost effective. And in some of these places, it's too hilly for cellular towers to reach, and the loops are very long. When I say loop, that's the copper wires are very, very long. Some in Wyoming are like 20 and 30 miles long. And in a lot of ways, those folks don't have an alternative, but their rate is maintained low by the Universal Service Fund, but it's very expensive to do so. There are new technologies. A rocket was launched yesterday, and it's going to have on board multiple satellites, and if you're careful where you look tonight, you might see all those satellites in a string before they disperse. It's an incredible technology. When you see that, you might see it driving home tonight. It's stunning to see that. That is a different type of satellite service than we've traditionally used, which is the geosynchronous satellite, which is thousands and thousands of miles up into the air and float over a particular point on the Earth. Its orbit matches the Earth's rotation. These satellites that you're seeing in that string tonight when you're driving home, they're located at low Earth orbit. They're much like a cellular system, only the difference is that on the Earth, we drive through the cellular system and it flips from one tower to another. With the satellite-based low Earth orbit, the satellites move and we switch from one satellite to another, like you're driving through a cellular field, but it's the same technology, only inverted. Are you with me? That provides very good service. It doesn't have the latency problems. There's no delay. It's good capacity. It's relatively affordable. That might be our solution for the future for those folks. And in fact, it is available now. It's even going to be better as they get more satellites in place. So there are solutions out there. There are also what they call fixed wireless solutions, where companies set up antennas that go to your location. That's relatively affordable now. All of that is probably cheaper than providing for these very long, old landlines out to these areas. And so the evolution is happening. I think by going to the $40 benchmark, it'll help the evolution to happen faster. Happy to answer any more questions.
Other questions? Senate File 51. Sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 51, say aye. All those opposed say no. That bill has passed the committee of the whole. And that is the last bill we have. Yes, Senator Northcott.
Mr. Chairman, privilege of the floor here for a moment. Good senators, I think we all just witnessed something first in history of Senator Case and Senator Scott working the same piece of legislation for 30 years, the Wyoming Telecommunications Act. Senators, excellent work of 30 years of legislation.
Senator Nethercott, I hope you have more to say than that.
I certainly do, I certainly do. The satellites are orbiting. Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee of the whole rise and report.
Yes, you have heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion carried.
Committee of the whole report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 74, do pass. Senate File 10, do pass. Senate File 41, do pass amended. Senate File 102, do pass amended. Senate File 58, do pass amended. Senate File 24, do pass amended. Senate Joint Resolution 1, do pass. Senate File 9, do pass amended. Senate File 55, do pass amended. Senate File 51, do pass amended. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole report has been adopted. Good job. Messages, let's see, what do we have? Messages from the House? Standing committee reports.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 24, 2025. For Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 115, Judicial Review of Agency Actions Limitations, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Crago, Hicks, Kolb, and Olson. Excused, Senator Crum, Senator Olson, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 107, Freedom to Work and Build Business, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Crago, Hicks, Kolb, and Olson. Excused, Senator Crum, Senator Olson, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 71, Ignition Interlock Restricted License Aggravated Homicide, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Crum, Hutchings, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Barlow, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 128, Repeal of Sales Tax on Electricity, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators French, Iden, McCune. No, Senators Case and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 79, District Courts Change of Venue, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Crago, Hicks, Kolb, and Olson. Excused Senator Crum. Senator Olson, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 75, Coroner Investigations, Disposition of Decedent's Property, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Crago, Hicks, Kolb, and Olson. Excused Senator Crum. Senator Olson, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred Senate File 65, Data Privacy, Government Entities, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, Nethercott, and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 96, Wyoming Gold Act, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators French, Ide, and McEwen. Noes Senators Case and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. And thank you, committees. Listen to all that work you guys have been doing. It's week 2, and we're kicking some tail here. Some statistics, Senate has passed 37 bills over to the House already, and our counterparts have sent us 19, so for those of you who are keeping score. Any other announcements? Before we go to those announcements from you guys, Madam Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, just more of an announcement here. Just a reminder, Senators, bill cutoff is Monday, January 27th. So in accordance with Senate Rule 4.5, bill drafts that have been prepared by LSO, approved per the sponsor, and returned to LSO by noon on Monday, January 27th, will appear on the final list of bills, which will be provided to the Senate as being within the cutoff deadline for jacketing bills. So Monday, January 27th, just be mindful of that, good senators. And then also, before we go to additional announcements, those property tax bills that you've been looking and studying at, those will be on Committee of the Whole on Monday, so be ready to discuss those. And with that, Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Monday, January 27th, 2025.
Thank you, Madam Majority Floor Leader. Committee announcements. Senator Case.
Mr. President, thank you. I'd kind of like to correct the announcement I made before the noon recess. Your Committee Number 7 will meet on Monday. For the bills that we have left, we have Senate File 111, net metering revisions. We're still working on that one. We have Senate File 47, Board of Trustees, Systems of Public Recreation Amendment. We also had noticed, and I didn't read it, the Senate Joint Resolution 4, resolution on base load, I can't read my own writing, base load power, Senate Joint Resolution 4.
Thank you. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, Social Services, meets Monday, January 27th, noon recess, to hear 2 bills, Senate File 113, Brader Opportunity Act, and Senate File 112, Anesthesiologist Assistance Licensing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee Number 5, Ag, State, and Public Lands, will meet next Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. to discuss 2 bills. Senate File 120, Wyoming Prime Act, and Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review, and Objection.
Thank you. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just fellow senators, this is so you can look ahead to Tuesday morning. Your Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee will take up the following 4 bills. Senate File 108, the Recreation, Safety, Agritourism Bill. Senate File 148, Fire Suppression and Restoration Funding. Senate File 152, Wildfire Management, Task Force and State Forester. And Senate File 149, Wildlife Conservation License Plates Amendments, if time permits. Again, that's on Tuesday morning, Senators. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Education Committee Number 4 will meet Monday, January 27th at 8 o'clock a.m. in room W110, and we will take a look at the following bills. Senate File 86, Alternative Teaching Certificate. Senate File 109, open enrollment within Wyoming school districts, and Senate Joint Resolution 3 commemorating Nellie Taylor Rossi, if time permits.
Thank you. Senator Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 8, Transportation, will be meeting Tuesday at 8 a.m. in the Capitol Extension to take up the following bills. Senate File 45, Wyoming State Guard Amendments. Senate File 119, Expedited Professional Licensure for Military Members. Senate File 5, School District Vehicles Flashing Lights Authorized. Senate File 106, Motor Vehicle Dealer and Manufacturer's Warranty Rates. Senate File 110, Inclusion of Crossing Guards for Governmental Claims Act. And if time permits, Senate File 121, Rodeo License Plate.
Thank you. Senator Olson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet in its new place of abode, which is W2, will be there all week. And we will consider 4 bills. Senate File 116, Anti-Money Laundering. Senate File 122, Voyeurism Sex Offender Registration Amendment. Senate File 133, Protection of Parental Rights Amendments. And Senate Joint Resolution 5, Congressional Term Limits.
Thank you. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Appropriations Committee meeting on Monday, January 27th, will begin upon noon recess. In 113, we'll be taking up 5 bills. Senate File 30, Wyoming Investment in Veterans Mental Health. Senate File 88, 2025 Large Project Funding. Senate File 91, Pictograph and Historic Inscription Protection. Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review and Objection. And finally, Senate File 168, Budget Reserve Account Repeal. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, will meet upon noon recess on Monday. We will be taking up government-owned land, Senate File 68 and Senate File 85, commercial enforcement of localities, and that will be in room 6. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Anderson?
Mr. President, your Minerals Committee, number 9, will meet Monday, January 17th upon noon recess, Capitol Extension Room W4. We'll hear 4 bills. Senate File 97, Trust Code Revisions. Senate File 134, Industrial Siting Wildlife Mitigations. Senate File 118, Energy Impact on Wyoming Economy Study. Senate File 144, Wyoming-Ireland Trade Commission. Thank you.
Okay. Any further announcements? Okay, you've all heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The Senate shall stand adjourned until Monday, January 27th at 10 a.m.